The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood quietly at her bedroom window. Her fingers traced the cool glass as she watched the familiar scene below. Gardeners tending to the roses, security personnel making their rounds, and the distant hum of London traffic beyond the palace walls. Today felt different, though she couldn't quite explain why. William had been unusually quiet during breakfast, his usual morning chatter replaced by thoughtful silence as he read through official documents. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had sensed the subtle shift in atmosphere, with Charlotte asking twice if everything was all right. Catherine had smiled and assured them all was well, but the question lingered in her own mind. The call had come 3 days earlier from Buckingham Palace. King Charles needed to speak with them urgently about a sensitive matter concerning the Commonwealth realms. The conversation that followed would change everything they thought they knew about their immediate future. A diplomatic crisis had emerged in one of the Commonwealth nations, and William's presence was desperately needed, not for days or weeks, but potentially for months. Catherine remembered how William had paced their private sitting room that evening, running his hands through his hair as he always did when faced with difficult decisions. The weight of duty had never felt heavier on his shoulders. As heir to the throne, he understood the gravity of representing the crown during international crises, but as a husband and father, the thought of extended separation from his family was almost unbearable. The princess had watched her husband struggle with the decision, knowing that whatever choice he made would require sacrifice. She had seen this internal battle before, the constant pull between personal desires and royal obligations. It was a burden they both carried, but one that seemed particularly heavy on William's conscience whenever it involved time away from their children. Their marriage had weathered many storms over the years, but nothing quite like this. Previous royal duties had taken them apart for days, occasionally weeks, but this assignment could stretch into months. The Commonwealth nation in question was experiencing political upheaval that threatened to destabilize the entire region, and William's diplomatic skills and royal status made him the ideal candidate to help broker peace. Catherine had spent sleepless nights considering the implications. George was at a crucial stage in his education, preparing for important examinations that would shape his academic future. Charlotte had recently started showing interest in competitive swimming and had qualified for her first major tournament. Louis, still so young, needed the stability of having both parents present during these formative years. Yet she also understood the weight of royal duty. Her own upbringing had instilled in her a strong sense of service and responsibility to others. When she married William, she had accepted that their lives would never be entirely their own. The crown came with privileges, but it also demanded sacrifices that ordinary families never had to make. The princess found herself thinking about her own parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, and how they had managed to build a strong family unit while running their successful business. They had shown her that love and commitment could overcome geographical distances, but they had also enjoyed the luxury of making their own choices about when and where to travel for work. Royal life offered no such freedoms. When the crown called, the response was never really a choice. It was an obligation that came with their titles and positions. Catherine had learned to accept this reality, but accepting it and finding it easy were entirely different things. She thought about the public's perception of their marriage, how the media often portrayed them as the perfect royal couple with an effortless relationship. The truth was far more complex. Like any marriage, theirs required constant work, communication, and compromise. The added pressure of public scrutiny made every challenge more difficult to navigate. The princess had always prided herself on being a supportive wife, someone who understood the demands of William's role, and who could provide stability and comfort when those demands became overwhelming. But this situation tested her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. Supporting her husband meant accepting a separation that would impact not just their relationship, but their children's daily lives as well. William had assured her that he would decline the assignment if she asked him to. The king had made it clear that the decision was ultimately William's to make, with full understanding of the personal cost involved. But Catherine knew her husband well enough to recognize that declining would weigh heavily on his conscience, particularly if the diplomatic situation deteriorated without his intervention. The couple had spent hours discussing alternatives, exploring every possible compromise. Could Catherine and the children accompany him? The security situation made that impossible. Could the assignment be shortened? The complex nature of the diplomatic crisis meant any intervention would need time to be effective. Could another royal family member take his place? William's unique combination of diplomatic experience and future kingship made him irreplaceable for this particular mission. As Catherine continued to gaze out the window, she noticed a young couple walking hand in hand through the nearby park. They moved with the easy confidence of people whose biggest decision that day might be where to have lunch or which movie to watch that evening. She envied their simplicity, their freedom to make choices based purely on personal preference, rather than national duty. The princess understood that her privileged position came with responsibilities that extended far beyond her own family's needs. Millions of people throughout the Commonwealth looked to the royal family for leadership, stability, and hope during times of crisis. William's intervention could potentially prevent conflict that might affect countless innocent lives. Yet knowing the greater good didn't make the personal sacrifice any easier to bear. Catherine had spent years building their family's routines, creating a sense of normalcy within the extraordinary circumstances of royal life. The thought of managing 3 active children, maintaining their education and activities, and fulfilling her own royal duties without William's support felt overwhelming. The morning light grew stronger, and Catherine knew that soon the children would be asking about their father's travel plans. They had noticed the increased number of meetings and telephone calls, the serious conversations that stopped when they entered the room. George, in particular, had inherited his father's perceptive nature and was already asking pointed questions about the upcoming trip. The decision weighed heavily on Prince William's mind as he walked through the corridors of Kensington Palace, each step echoing softly on the polished floors. The meeting with his father, King Charles, had concluded just hours ago, and the gravity of the Commonwealth crisis was becoming clearer by the moment. Political unrest in the region threatened to escalate into something far more serious, and diplomatic intervention was needed immediately. William paused outside the children's playroom, hearing their laughter filter through the door. George was helping Louis with a complicated building block construction, while Charlotte practiced her piano scales in the adjacent music room. These moments of ordinary family life had become precious to him, especially knowing how rare they might become in the coming months. The prince had spent his entire adult life balancing personal desires with royal obligations, but this situation felt different. Previous assignments had been measured in days or weeks with clear end dates that allowed him to plan his return. This diplomatic mission carried no such certainty. The political situation could resolve quickly, or it could drag on indefinitely, depending on factors entirely beyond his control. Catherine had been remarkably understanding during their discussions, offering support even as he could see the worry in her eyes. She had married into the royal family knowing that duty would sometimes require difficult sacrifices, but understanding something intellectually and living through it emotionally were vastly different experiences. The prince thought about his own childhood, remembering the periods when his father had been called away on extended royal duties. He recalled the confusion of trying to understand why important family events had to be postponed, or why bedtime stories sometimes came from telephone calls instead of in person. Despite his parents' best efforts to maintain connection across distances, nothing could completely replace physical presence. Now he faced the prospect of missing months of his children's lives. George was approaching adolescence, a time when father-son conversations became increasingly important. Charlotte was developing her own interests and personality, often seeking her father's approval for her various achievements. Louis, still so young, might struggle to understand why Daddy had to go away for so long. The Commonwealth situation had deteriorated rapidly over the past weeks. What had begun as political disagreement had evolved into civil unrest, threatening the stability of not just one nation, but potentially the entire region. Intelligence reports suggested that without skilled diplomatic intervention, the situation could escalate into something far more serious, affecting millions of innocent people. William's unique position as future king, combined with his diplomatic training and personal relationships with various Commonwealth leaders, made him the ideal candidate to lead the mediation efforts. His presence would carry weight that no other diplomat could provide, offering hope for a peaceful resolution to an increasingly dangerous situation. The prince had always taken his role as future monarch seriously, understanding that his position came with privileges but also with profound responsibilities. The Commonwealth realms looked to the British royal family for leadership and stability, particularly during times of crisis. Declining this assignment would mean abandoning people who needed help, a choice that would haunt him regardless of the personal benefits. Yet the personal cost felt enormous. Catherine would be left to manage their household alone, juggling her own royal duties with the full responsibility of raising 3 children. Their carefully constructed family routines would be disrupted, and the children would have to adapt to their father's absence during what was already a challenging period in their young lives. The prince had spoken extensively with his private secretary about the logistics of the assignment. Communication technology would allow for regular video calls and virtual presence at important family events. But these digital connections were poor substitutes for being physically present. He would miss bedtime stories, school events, family dinners, and countless small moments that formed the foundation of strong family relationships. William remembered his mother's words about the importance of being present for one's children. Princess Diana had often spoken about how quickly children grew up, and how impossible it was to reclaim missed moments. Her wisdom felt particularly relevant now, as he contemplated an extended absence during some of his children's most formative years. The security briefings had made clear that this assignment would not be like previous royal visits. The political situation meant that his movements would be restricted, and the security protocols would be extensive. There would be no possibility of quick trips home, no emergency flights back for family events. Once he committed to the mission, he would need to see it through to completion, regardless of what he might miss at home. Catherine had suggested that perhaps the assignment could be structured differently, with other family members sharing the responsibility. However, the delicate nature of the diplomatic situation required consistency and leadership. The various parties involved had specifically requested William's involvement, knowing that his future role as king would give his words particular weight in negotiations. The prince had also considered the impact on Catherine's own royal duties. She had developed several important patronages and commitments that required her regular attention. Managing these responsibilities while single-handedly caring for 3 children would be an enormous challenge. He worried about the strain this would place on his wife, both physically and emotionally. Staff members had assured him that additional support would be provided during his absence, but William knew that no amount of professional help could replace a parent's presence. The children looked to both their parents for guidance, comfort, and stability. Removing one half of that equation, even temporarily, would inevitably create challenges. The prince found himself questioning whether previous generations of royals had faced similar dilemmas, or whether the modern world's global connectivity had created new types of obligations that his ancestors never had to consider. The Commonwealth was larger and more complex than ever before, with member nations spread across multiple continents and time zones. William's phone buzzed with another urgent message from the Foreign Office. The situation overseas was deteriorating rapidly, and decisions needed to be made quickly. Every hour of delay increased the risk of the crisis escalating beyond diplomatic resolution. He realized that his personal deliberations, while important to his family, seemed almost trivial compared to the potential consequences of inaction. Yet he also understood that strong families formed the foundation of strong leadership. His own ability to serve effectively as a future monarch depended partly on his emotional stability and personal happiness. Sacrificing his family relationships for duty might serve short-term diplomatic goals but could undermine his long-term effectiveness as a leader. The evening light filtered through the tall windows of the family's private dining room as Catherine watched her children enjoy what would be their last family dinner together for many months. William had made his decision that afternoon, accepting the Commonwealth assignment despite the personal cost. The conversation with King Charles had been brief but decisive. Duty would prevail over personal preference, as it always did in royal life. George seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, eating his meal more quietly than usual, and glancing frequently at his father. Charlotte chattered about her upcoming piano recital, unaware that her father might not be there to hear her performance. Louis, blissfully unaware of the coming changes, focused entirely on his favorite pasta dish, occasionally offering bites to his parents with characteristic toddler generosity. William had requested this private family time before the official announcements began. Once the palace released news of his diplomatic mission, their lives would be consumed by media attention, security briefings, and the endless logistics of royal travel. These precious hours represented their final opportunity to exist as simply a family, without the weight of public scrutiny and official obligations. Catherine had spent the day making practical preparations while processing her own emotions about the impending separation. The children's schedules would need to be maintained, their education continued without interruption, and their emotional needs addressed with extra care during their father's absence. She had contacted their schools to inform the teachers about the upcoming changes and arrange for additional support. Staff to help manage the household. The princess had also begun the difficult task of explaining the situation to the children in age-appropriate terms. George, being the oldest, understood more about his father's royal responsibilities and accepted the explanation with mature resignation. Charlotte had asked numerous questions about when Daddy would return, requiring gentle but honest answers about the uncertainty of the timeline. Louis would be told gradually, as his young mind could better process the information in small pieces. William had made a special effort to connect with each child individually that evening. He spent time with George discussing the importance of helping his mother and siblings during his absence, emphasizing the young prince's role as the eldest child. With Charlotte, he reviewed her upcoming activities and promised to attend them virtually whenever possible. Louis received extra attention during his bedtime routine, with William reading several additional stories and singing the special songs that had become their nightly tradition. The couple had agreed that maintaining normalcy would be crucial during the separation. Regular video calls would be scheduled around the children's activities, and William would participate in important family decisions from afar. Technology would help bridge the physical distance, though both parents understood its limitations compared to actual presence. Catherine had received numerous offers of support from extended family members and close friends. Her parents had immediately volunteered to spend more time with the grandchildren, and William's brother Harry had called to offer whatever assistance might be needed. The broader royal family had also rallied around them, with various members offering to help with official duties and family responsibilities. The princess found herself thinking about military families who faced similar separations, often with far less support and resources than the royal family enjoyed. Her privileged position came with advantages that made this separation more manageable than it might be for ordinary families. Yet the emotional challenges remained fundamentally the same. Love and family bonds couldn't be replaced by wealth or status. That evening, as they tucked the children into bed together, William had given each of them a special gift, a small communication device that would allow them to contact him directly whenever they needed to talk. The technology was simple enough for even Louis to operate, ensuring that none of the children would feel cut off from their father during his absence. Catherine had watched her husband's careful attention to these details, recognizing his determination to minimize the impact of his absence on their children's emotional security. William had always been a hands-on father, involved in the daily routines and decisions that shaped their family life. His absence would create a void that she would need to fill while maintaining her own emotional strength. The princess had also begun preparing herself mentally for the increased public attention that would accompany William's mission. As a single parent during his absence, she would face heightened scrutiny from media outlets eager to analyze how she managed the challenges of solo parenting while maintaining her royal duties. Every public appearance would be evaluated for signs of stress or difficulty. Privacy had always been precious to their family, and maintaining it during William's absence would require extra vigilance. The children's activities and schedules would need careful protection to ensure they could continue their normal lives without excessive media intrusion. Catherine had already worked with security personnel to adjust their protocols and provide additional protection where needed. The couple had spent considerable time discussing the emotional aspects of their separation, acknowledging that both of them would face unique challenges. William would carry the burden of missing important family moments while dealing with the stress of complex diplomatic negotiations. Catherine would manage the daily pressures of single parenting while worrying about her husband's safety and well-being in a potentially volatile situation. They had established communication protocols that would help them stay connected despite the time zone differences and William's demanding schedule. Regular check-ins would provide opportunities to discuss family decisions and maintain their partnership in parenting, even across great distances. These conversations would need to be carefully scheduled around both the children's routines and the diplomatic meetings that would consume William's days. Catherine had also prepared contingency plans for various scenarios, from medical emergencies to important family celebrations. While she hoped that William's mission would conclude quickly, she understood the importance of being ready for an extended separation. The uncertainty of the timeline made planning particularly challenging, but she was determined to provide stability for their children, regardless of how long the separation lasted. The evening concluded with William and Catherine spending private time together, discussing their hopes and fears about the coming months. They reaffirmed their commitment to their marriage and family, acknowledging that this separation would test their relationship in new ways. Yet they also expressed confidence in their love and partnership, built on years of facing challenges together and emerging stronger. As they prepared for bed, both parents checked on their sleeping children one final time. The peaceful faces of George, Charlotte, and Louis served as a reminder of why their sacrifices mattered, not just for the Commonwealth crisis, but for the family values they hoped to instill in the next generation of royals. The morning of departure arrived with unseasonable warmth for London, as if nature itself was trying to ease the difficulty of the day ahead. Catherine had awakened early, unable to sleep as her mind raced through final preparations and the approaching moment of goodbye. William was already awake beside her, staring at the ceiling in the pre-dawn darkness, both of them lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. The palace had been bustling with activity since before sunrise. Security teams conducted final briefings while staff members completed the last-minute logistics of international travel. William's diplomatic team had arrived early to review crucial documents and coordinate with their counterparts overseas. Despite all the official preparations, the most important moments would happen quietly, within their family's private quarters. Catherine had chosen to dress carefully for this goodbye, selecting an outfit that would photograph well if any images emerged, but more importantly, something that would comfort her throughout the difficult day ahead. She had learned over the years that clothing choices during emotional moments became lasting visual memories, both for herself and for the public who followed their families. Life through the media, the children, had been gently awakened and brought to their parents, room for private family time. Before the official departure procedures began, George, now old enough to understand the weight of the situation, sat close to his father while William explained once more why this trip was necessary and how they would stay connected. Charlotte curled up on Catherine's lap, asking again when Daddy would come home, accepting the honest answer that nobody could be certain about the timeline. Louis, still too young to fully comprehend the situation, seemed to sense the emotional atmosphere around him. He moved between his parents, seeking extra attention and comfort, without understanding why everyone seemed so serious. William lifted his youngest son, holding him close and breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, knowing it would be months before he could do this again. The prince had prepared individual letters for each of his children, to be opened at specific milestones during his absence. George would receive his first letter on his upcoming birthday, Charlotte would get hers before her piano recital, and Louis would have his read to him when he started missing his father. These tangible connections were meant to bridge the gap that technology couldn't completely fill. Catherine had also prepared a special gift for William, a photo album containing recent family pictures and notes from each of the children. The album was small enough to travel with him, but comprehensive enough to provide comfort during difficult moments. She had spent hours selecting the images that best captured their family's happiness and love, hoping they would sustain him through the challenges ahead. The couple had decided to keep the actual departure private, away from media attention that might make the emotional moment even more difficult for their children. The official photographs and statements would come later, after William had left and the family had time to process their emotions without public scrutiny. As the departure time approached, the atmosphere in their private quarters became increasingly emotional. William moved through the familiar rooms of their home, touching surfaces and objects that held special meaning, trying to imprint these memories for the lonely months ahead. He paused at each child's bedroom door, looking at the spaces where they played, studied, and dreamed, knowing how much they would grow and change while he was away. The security briefing had made clear that communication would be limited and carefully monitored. Due to the sensitive nature of his diplomatic mission, video calls would be possible but not always practical, depending on his location and the political situation. This uncertainty about contact made the goodbye feel even more final than either parent had anticipated. Catherine had prepared herself mentally for this moment, but the reality of watching her husband pack for an indefinite separation proved more difficult than she had imagined. Small details became emotionally significant. His favorite books that would accompany him, the formal clothes required for diplomatic functions, the casual items that would remind him of home. The children each had their own way of processing the approaching separation. George asked detailed questions about his father's work, seeming to find comfort in understanding the importance of the mission. Charlotte became more clingy than usual, wanting to help pack William's bags and ensure that her drawings were included among his belongings. Louis continued playing as normal, but kept checking to make sure both parents were still nearby. William had arranged for special traditions to continue during his absence. The bedtime stories would be recorded in advance for the nights when live calls weren't possible. Family game night would continue with him participating virtually when time zones allowed. These efforts to maintain connection represented hope that their family bonds could survive the test of separation. The princess had coordinated with William's staff to ensure she would receive regular updates about his well-being and schedule. While she couldn't be told classified details about his diplomatic work, knowing his general location and safety status would help ease her worry during the most difficult moments of missing him. Their private goodbye began with a family group hug that lasted far longer than usual, each member reluctant to break the circle of connection. William whispered personal messages to each child, promises and reassurances meant to carry them through the difficult days ahead. He told George to take care of his mother and siblings, reminded Charlotte that he would be thinking of her during every piano practice, and promised Louis that Daddy's love would travel with him everywhere. The most difficult moment came when William had to say goodbye to Catherine privately. Years of marriage had created a deep emotional connection that made separation particularly painful. They held each other without words, both understanding that their relationship would be tested in new ways during the coming months. The strength of their partnership would need to sustain them both through challenges they had never faced before. Catherine fought back tears as she watched William gather his final belongings, knowing that once he left their private quarters, he would become Prince William on official duty, no longer just her husband and the children's father. The transformation from private family man to public royal figure was always remarkable to witness, but today it felt like losing part of him even before he physically departed. The couple had promised each other to focus on hope rather than sadness, to view this separation as a temporary challenge rather than a crisis. Their love had weathered many storms over the years, and this diplomatic mission, however difficult, would eventually end with reunion and renewed appreciation for their time together. The final moments before William's departure unfolded with heartbreaking tenderness as the family gathered in the private courtyard behind Kensington Palace. The security detail waited respectfully at a distance, allowing the royal family these precious last minutes together before duty would separate them for an unknown length of time. The official car sat quietly nearby, its engine running, ready to begin the journey that would take the prince to RAF Northolt and then across the world to his diplomatic mission. Catherine stood beside William, her hand clasped tightly in his, drawing strength from their physical connection while it was still possible. She had promised herself that she would remain composed for the children's sake. But the reality of watching her husband leave for an indefinite period proved almost overwhelming. Years of royal training had taught her to maintain dignity in public moments. Yet this private farewell challenged every emotional defense she had carefully constructed. George approached his father with the serious demeanor that had become more pronounced as he grew older and understood more about their family's unique responsibilities. The young prince had prepared his own goodbye speech, something he had practiced in his room the night before. His words were simple but profound, telling his father that he understood why the trip was necessary and promising to help take care of everyone while William was away. Charlotte had brought a special drawing she had created that morning, a colorful picture of their family holding hands around the world. She explained to her father that the drawing showed how their love would stretch across any distance, connecting them even when they couldn't be together physically. William knelt down to her level, studying the artwork with serious attention and promising to keep it with him every day of his travels. Louis, sensing the emotional weight of the moment despite his young age, had become unusually quiet and clingy. He wrapped his small arms around his father's neck and refused to let go, as if understanding instinctively that this goodbye was different from the brief separations they had experienced before. William held his youngest son close, whispering reassurances and promises while fighting back his own emotions. The prince had prepared final gifts for each family member, tokens that would provide comfort during the difficult months ahead. For Catherine, he presented a piece of jewelry that had belonged to his mother, Diana, something he had been saving for a special occasion. The necklace represented not just his love, but the continuation of family traditions and the strength that had sustained the royal family through previous challenges. George received his grandfather's compass, a family heirloom that had guided previous generations through their own journeys and adventures. William explained that the compass would always point toward home, just as his heart would always point toward his family no matter how far his duties took him. The symbolism was not lost on the young prince, who accepted the gift with the solemnity it deserved. Charlotte was given a music box that had been specially crafted for this moment, containing a melody that William had commissioned based on her favorite lullaby. He explained that whenever she missed him, she could play the music and know that he was thinking of her at that exact moment, regardless of where in the world he might be. Little Louis received a stuffed animal that had been infused with William's cologne, ensuring that the familiar scent would provide comfort during bedtime and other difficult moments. The prince had also recorded several of Louis's favorite bedtime stories, creating a library of his voice that could be played whenever his youngest son needed the reassurance of Daddy's presence. Catherine watched these exchanges with a mixture of pride and heartbreak, recognizing William's thoughtful attention to each child's individual needs while preparing for their separation. His careful consideration of their emotional well-being demonstrated the depth of his love and his determination to maintain strong connections despite the physical distance that duty would require. The family created their own private ceremony to mark this departure, joining hands in a circle and sharing words of love and commitment that would sustain them through the coming challenges. Each member spoke about their hopes for William's safe return and their promises to support each other during his absence. The moment was deeply personal yet carried the weight of history, as royal families had faced similar separations for generations. William's departure team had arranged for regular communication schedules, but the unpredictable nature of diplomatic work meant that flexibility would be essential. The prince had prepared detailed instructions for various scenarios, ensuring that important family decisions could be made collaboratively even across vast distances and time zone differences. The couple had also established code words and private signals that would allow them to communicate emotional support during video calls that might be monitored for security reasons. These intimate shortcuts, developed over years of marriage, would help maintain their personal connection, even in the formal environment of diplomatic communications. As the time for departure arrived, William gathered his family into one final group embrace, holding them close and memorizing the feeling of having all his loved ones safe in his arms. He whispered individual promises to each child and shared a private moment with Catherine that spoke to the deep partnership they had built over years of marriage and shared challenges. The walk to the waiting car seemed to take both forever and no time at all. William moved slowly, reluctant to break the final physical connection with his family, while also knowing that prolonging the goodbye would only make it more difficult for everyone involved. The children followed alongside, each processing the moment in their own way but united in their desire to stay close to their father for as long as possible. Catherine accompanied William to the car door, their hands remaining linked until the very last moment. Their private conversation was brief but intense, reaffirming their love and commitment while acknowledging the challenges that lay ahead. She watched him settle into the back seat, his royal composure already returning as he prepared to transition from family man to diplomat. The car pulled away slowly, allowing William a final wave to his family from the rear window. Catherine held the children close as they watched their father disappear around the corner, beginning a journey that would take him to the other side of the world and into months of uncertainty. The silence that followed was profound, marking the end of one chapter of their family life and the beginning of another that would test their bonds in ways they had never experienced. Standing together in the empty courtyard, the remaining family members began to process the reality of their new situation. Catherine knew that the coming hours and days would be crucial for helping the children adjust to their father's absence, while maintaining the stability and love that formed the foundation of their family life. The hours following William's departure felt surreal to Catherine as she guided her children through the remainder of what had started as an ordinary day but had become a watershed moment in their family's life. The palace, usually filled with the energy of their complete family unit, seemed quieter and somehow larger without William's presence. Even the staff moved more softly, as if recognizing that the emotional atmosphere required extra sensitivity and care. Charlotte was the first to break the contemplative silence that had settled over them after watching their father's car disappear. She asked when they would hear from Daddy, her voice carrying the hope and uncertainty that all of them felt. Catherine explained the communication schedule that had been arranged, emphasizing that while the calls might not happen every day due to William's important work, they would definitely hear from him regularly. George had retreated to his room with his grandfather's compass, studying the antique instrument, and clearly thinking deeply about his father's words about always pointing toward home. Catherine found him there an hour later, spinning the compass and watching the needle consistently find magnetic north, as if testing whether the metaphor his father had shared would prove true in practice. Louis seemed to sense the change in their family dynamic without fully understanding what had happened. He carried his new stuffed animal everywhere, frequently holding it to his nose to catch the familiar scent of his father. Catherine noticed him looking toward the door whenever he heard footsteps, as if expecting William to walk through at any moment. The princess had prepared activities to help distract the children, while allowing them to process their emotions naturally. She organized a special lunch in the garden, something William had always enjoyed with them, maintaining the tradition while creating new memories that didn't depend on his presence. The children seemed grateful for the normalcy of routine, even as they adjusted to the absence of their father's voice and laughter at the table. Catherine's own adjustment to single parenting began immediately, as she found herself making decisions that she and William typically discussed together. Small choices about the children's schedules, meal preferences, and evening activities suddenly carried more weight when she was the sole decision-maker. She realized how much she had relied on William's input and perspective in their daily parenting partnership. The first video call was scheduled for that evening, after William had arrived at his destination and completed his initial diplomatic briefings. Catherine spent considerable time preparing the children for this digital reunion, explaining that Daddy might look tired from traveling and that their conversation might be shorter than usual due to his busy schedule. She wanted to manage their expectations while maintaining their excitement about seeing their father. When the call connected, the family gathered around the computer screen in their private sitting room, each child eager to see their father's face and hear his voice. William appeared tired but smiled warmly at seeing his family, asking each child about their day and sharing safe details about his journey. The technology that connected them across thousands of miles felt miraculous yet insufficient compared to physical presence. Charlotte showed her father the picture she had drawn during the afternoon, holding it up to the camera so he could see every detail. George shared his discoveries about the compass, explaining how he had tested its accuracy around the palace grounds. Louis simply pressed his stuffed animal against the screen, as if trying to share its comfort with his father through the digital connection. Catherine watched her children's faces during the call, noting how they lit up at seeing William, but also observing the subtle disappointment when they realized they couldn't hug him or share physical affection. The limitations of video technology became apparent in these moments. When love wanted to express itself through touch, but could only be communicated through words and facial expressions. The conversation lasted longer than planned, as none of them wanted to end the connection that felt so precious and fragile. William answered every question patiently, listened to every story attentively, and provided the reassurance that each family member needed to feel secure in his love despite the distance. When the call finally ended, the silence that followed felt different from the earlier quiet. It was filled with hope rather than uncertainty. Bedtime. Routines required adjustment without William's participation. In the nightly rituals he had always shared with his children, Catherine found herself taking on roles that her husband typically filled, from reading specific bedtime stories in particular voices, to providing the physical comfort that helped each child settle for sleep. The children accepted these changes with remarkable adaptability, though she could see them listening for their father's voice in the corridors. The princess spent her own first evening alone in years processing the reality of her new temporary circumstances. The responsibilities of managing the children's emotional needs while maintaining their normal routines felt overwhelming at moments, yet she also recognized her own strength and capability. Years of royal training and personal growth had prepared her for challenges, though nothing quite like extended single parenting. She found comfort in writing in her private journal, documenting not just the events of the day, but her feelings about this new chapter in their family life. The practice of recording her thoughts helped her process the complex emotions of missing her husband while feeling proud of his service to the Commonwealth. The dual nature of royal life, personal sacrifice for public good, had never felt more relevant or challenging. Catherine also began adapting to the increased media attention that accompanied her role as a temporarily single royal parent. Palace communications staff had prepared strategies for managing public interest while protecting the children's privacy during this vulnerable time. The balance between transparency about William's mission and protection of their family's emotional well-being required careful navigation. The support system that surrounded their family became more important than ever. During these early days of separation, Catherine's parents had immediately offered to spend more time with their grandchildren, providing additional emotional support and practical help. The royal staff had also adjusted their duties to offer extra assistance with the children's activities and educational needs. Evening brought the children back to Catherine with various requests and needs that normally might have been shared between both parents. George wanted help with homework that usually involved his father's input. Charlotte needed comfort after a minor disagreement with friends at school. Louis simply wanted extra attention and reassurance that seemed to require more energy than Catherine had anticipated. As she tucked each child into bed that first night without their father, Catherine realized that while the next months would challenge their family in new ways, they also offered opportunities to grow stronger and more resilient. The love that connected them to William hadn't diminished with distance. It had simply taken on new forms of expression that would need to sustain them through the weeks and months ahead. 3 months had passed since that emotional farewell in the palace courtyard, and the royal family had settled into new rhythms that honored both their separation and their enduring connection. William's diplomatic mission had achieved significant breakthroughs in the Commonwealth crisis, earning international recognition for his skilled mediation and patient negotiation. More importantly for his family, the end of his assignment was finally in sight. With a confirmed return date just weeks away, Catherine had grown into her role as temporary single parent with grace and strength that impressed even her closest supporters. The challenges had been real and sometimes overwhelming, but she had discovered reserves of resilience that surprised her. The children had adapted remarkably well, maintaining their academic progress, pursuing their interests, and developing new independence while never losing their connection to their absent father. The communication routines that seemed so difficult in the early days had become cherished family traditions. William's evening calls, scheduled around diplomatic meetings and time zone differences, had become the highlight of each day. The children had learned to share these precious moments efficiently, each knowing they would have individual time with their father, while also enjoying group conversations that kept the family bond strong. George had emerged as a protective older brother, taking seriously his father's request to help care for his mother and siblings. His maturity had blossomed during these months, and his relationship with Catherine had deepened as they navigated challenges together. The compass his father had given him had become a treasured possession, consulted frequently and treated with the reverence of a family heirloom. Charlotte's piano skills had flourished during her father's absence, perhaps channeled by her desire to have something special to share with him when he returned. Her recital, attended virtually by William despite the diplomatic schedule, had been a triumph that brought tears to her father's eyes as he watched from thousands of miles away. The music box he had given her remained by her bedside, its melody providing comfort during difficult moments. Louis had grown considerably during these months, his vocabulary expanding, and his personality becoming more defined. The stuffed animal that carried his father's scent had been a constant companion, though its original fragrance had long since faded. Catherine had discreetly refreshed it with William's cologne during their video calls, maintaining the comfort it provided without Louis realizing the connection had been renewed. The princess had documented this period carefully, creating a comprehensive record of the children's growth and achievements for William to review upon his return. Photos, videos, artwork, school reports, and personal milestones filled albums that would help him feel connected to the months he had missed. These tangible memories represented love made manifest across distance and time. Public reaction to their family's separation had been overwhelmingly supportive, with British citizens expressing both pride in William's service and admiration for Catherine's handling of single parenthood. Letters and messages of encouragement had arrived from around the Commonwealth, creating a sense of shared sacrifice and mutual support that reinforced the value of William's mission. The palace had received confirmation that William's diplomatic work had prevented a potential conflict that could have affected millions of lives throughout the region. His patient negotiation and the weight of his royal position had helped broker agreements that established lasting peace frameworks. The personal cost to his family had contributed to a greater good that validated their sacrifice while making their reunion even more precious. Catherine had planned the homecoming carefully, working with palace staff to ensure that William's return would be both a private family celebration and a moment of public recognition for his service. The balance between personal reunion and royal responsibility required thoughtful coordination, but she was determined that their children would have their father back in the most meaningful way possible. The children had each prepared special surprises for their father's return. George had written a detailed account of family events during William's absence, creating a chronicle that would help his father feel connected to the months they had been apart. Charlotte had composed a song that incorporated the melody from her music box, planning to perform it as a welcome home concert. Louis had been practicing new words and skills, eager to show his daddy how much he had grown. As the return date approached, the excitement in the palace became palpable. Staff members who had supported the family through the separation shared in the anticipation of reunion, having witnessed the children's resilience and Catherine's strength during the challenging months. The household that had adapted to William's absence was now preparing to welcome him home. Catherine found herself both eager and nervous about the reunion. 3 months of independent decision-making and single parenting had changed her in subtle ways, building confidence and revealing capabilities she hadn't fully recognized before. She wondered how easily they would settle back into their partnership after months of managing their family responsibilities differently. The final video call before William's departure from his diplomatic assignment was filled with barely contained excitement as the children counted down the days until their father's return. William looked tired but triumphant, clearly proud of his diplomatic achievements but even more eager to return to his family. The months of separation had clarified what mattered most to him, reinforcing his commitment to both duty and family in proper balance. Palace security had quietly arranged for William's homecoming to be private, allowing the family their reunion without immediate media attention. The public celebration of his diplomatic success would come later, but the first moments of return would belong entirely to the family that had sacrificed so much for his service to the Commonwealth. As Catherine prepared for William's homecoming, she reflected on the journey they had all taken during these months of separation. The experience had tested their family bonds but ultimately strengthened them, proving that love could indeed bridge any distance when supported by commitment, communication, and hope. The goodbye that had moved Britain was about to become a reunion that would restore a family and demonstrate the enduring power of love over duty's demands. The children fell asleep, that final night counting hours until their father's return, their dreams filled with anticipation of hugs, stories, and the restoration of their complete family circle. Tomorrow would bring the end of their longest separation and the beginning of a new appreciation for the precious gift of being together.